Well, hello, I'm Annette from CDI Lincoln Clinical Documentation Specialist Services. Have you ever walked away from just delivering a education session to some clinicians thinking, that went okay, that went quite well, really, but in your heart you kind of know you could have done better? What I'm going to share with you today is how you can take a good presentation and make it an excellent presentation by applying the GEM approach, which is essentially 3 pillars to the GEM approach: grab attention, engage audience, mobilise message. So if that's you, let's get into it. So grab attention. What's so important of grabbing attention and having some sort of hook at the beginning of your talk? What this does is it sets the scene and the tone for what's about to follow, and it also gives your audience something to focus on to really get their attention. And there's so many different strategies that you could use in order to grab attention. You could start your talk with some local data. Something like an audit recently showed that 40% of patients diagnosed with angina over the last 3 months lacked specificity in the clinical documentation. Or another strategy is to use statistics, probably something a bit broader, something like, did you know that 60% of all deaths attributed to sepsis occurs in the older adult population? Another strategy is you could start with a quote, something like, every problem has a solution. The problem is finding the solution to the problem. You could also tell a story, something that's interesting, intriguing, inspiring, something that's really going to connect with your audience. Another strategy, you might tell a joke, or you might, if you're musically inclined or talented, you might sing a few lyrics of a song, or you may even do an interpretive dance. So whichever strategy you select, for it to be genuine and authentic, it must meet 3 criteria. It must suit the presenter, it must suit the presentation, the content, and it must suit the audience. So in order to suit the presenter, if you're tone deaf and have got 2 left feet, singing a song and dancing is probably not going to come across as too authentic. In terms of suiting the presentation of the content, if your talk is about death and dying and you start out with a joke, it's not going to go over well with the audience. And in terms of suiting the audience, if your audience is a room full of international clinicians who have literally just flown into the country, they hit the airport, they were bused to the hospital and this is their first day and you're up first and you're presenting about clinical documentation. If you start off with, or you open your talk with a story about 3 yobbos walking into a pub and it's full of Aussie slang and it's full of colloquialisms, they're not going to get it. You're going to have lost them right from the get-go, and they're going to spend all their time to work out, probably on their phones, trying to work out what you're talking about. So it's really important that those 3 criteria must be met for when you're selecting which strategies to use. Okay, so that's grab attention. The 3rd pillar is engage the audience. And what you want to do here is, what we're trying to do is convert the passive listener to an active learner. And because what we want them to do is not just listen to what we're saying, but we're actually wanting them to absorb the information. We're wanting them to process it, interpret it in their own way, and then store it in the memory banks. So that's what an active learner is. And so again, there's multitude of strategies that you can use in order for this to happen. So you could just use questions to the audience, or you could ask the audience to ask you questions. You might, if it's a large group, it's kind of a little bit difficult sometimes, but you might ask a rhetorical question. And if you do, always pause for a little bit after the rhetorical question to give them time to think about a response before you quickly move on to the next bit of your talk. Another strategy that you might use is you might introduce some activities, whether that's individual activities that they work alone on, or whether it's in groups of 2 or 3, or it's a large group if they may be working in activities at a table. And another strategy you could potentially use is using some sort of technical software such as Kahoot, Mementi, which is where it takes a bit of preparation, but your audience members log into these software apps, and there's pre-planned questions there, and as you go through your presentation, these questions come up, they answer it, and in real time you see the results up on your PowerPoint presentation. And again, depending on which strategy you select, still must meet those three criteria. So we're talking about suiting the presenter. So if you're not particularly tech savvy, using Kahoot or Mementi or any of those other ones probably won't be in your best interest to use, because in case there's some issues, some tech issues, unless you've got tech support sitting in the room with you, then go for it. The second criteria is it must suit the content, the presentation content. So if your presentation is less than 5 minutes, or I would even say less than 10 minutes, using something like Kahoot, it takes time, and you're going to lose very valuable time when you could be giving information that you probably don't have. So I wouldn't use it. It certainly wouldn't use it in a presentation under 5, and I may not under 10 minutes, but that's up to you to decide. And it must suit your audience. So if your audience is not particularly tech savvy, so they may be older, or they're just not technically minded, they don't even carry a phone. And if they carry a phone, it's not a smartphone. But if they do carry a smartphone, it's not turned on. But if it is turned on, there's no data. But if there is data, they are so slow. And if you watch them texting, it's such a laborious process that it's not going to be in your interest as the presenter or your audience interest if you spend 3/4 of the time of your presentation just trying to sort out the tech side of things. All right, so we've talked about grab attention, and we've talked about engage audience. The third pillar is mobilise message. Research tells us that audience members are more likely to remember the beginning of your talk and the end of your talk. So it's wise to give them the information, the key takeaways, maybe 2 or 3 key takeaways at the end of your talk that you want them to remember. Just dot point, just very easy, very quick to remember bits of information. But again, it's not just about the information. You need to tell them what you want them to do with it, especially because as clinical documentation specialists, we're about behavioural change in clinical documentation. So what do you want them to do with that information you've just given them? Kind of like a call to action, if you will. So again, the 3 criteria must be met. So it must suit the presenter. So, and what I mean here is, if you've just spent 10 minutes delivering in a nice, calm, even manner, very friendly, very, engaging, but just very chill, if you get to the call to actions bit and you suddenly turn into this over-the-top car salesperson, it's not going to come across genuine or authentic. So it also must suit your presentation or the content. So if your call to action is not aligned with your key takeaways and it's not aligned with the content of your talk, then you've lost connection straight away. Okay? And the third one is it must suit your audience. So if your call to action is not achievable, if it's not actionable, if it's not accessible or measurable in some way, then you've lost, or you're at risk of losing their motivation and the opportunity for behavioural change in terms of clinical documentation. So it would be a travesty of injustice if I did not use what we've spoken about today and end this with key takeaways and basically a call to action. So the takeaways from today's session. Applying the GEM approach will take a good presentation and make it a great presentation. And there are 3 pillars to the GEM approach: grab attention, engage audience, mobilise message. And whichever strategy you select must meet 3 criteria. It must suit the presenter, it must suit the presentation of the content, and it must suit the audience. So my challenge to you today is to take one of your many good presentations, perhaps one of the ones you deliver for orientation of clinicians. These types of presentations, we give them so often that we could almost recite it in our sleep. So take one of those presentations, apply the GEM approach, and the next time you go to deliver that presentation, I want you to take note of the audience and how they respond. And as you're leaving, I want you to take note of how you're feeling things went. And I'd love to hear how it went for you in applying the GEM approach. So as always, be passionate, be innovative, take care, and stay safe. Bye for now.